Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Yet podcast. Indeed, welcome to another season of the Yet podcast. I had so much fun in season 1 that I decided to do it all over again. And I am so glad you've joined for this episode and for this season. Hey, if you don't know me, I want to introduce myself real quick. My name is TC Burr. I am a husband, a father, a corporate employee, and recently I've also become an author and a podcaster. So if you want to hear more about my story, go check out some of the early episodes of season 1. But suffice to say, I had a dream of writing a book for a very long time. And for a very long time, I put that off because I doubted myself. I didn't think that, that just wasn't the path that I had chosen. And that was for somebody else. It wasn't for me. But finally, about a year or so ago, I decided, you know what? I'm not just going to let this dream die. I'm going to start taking action. And so I did. Little by little, every day, I started chipping away, writing 100 words, 200 words, 500 words a day, until eventually I ended up with a completed first draft manuscript of my novel, which I'm still going through the process of self-editing, and I'm going to need to find beta readers and, editors and the whole deal. And I'm still going through that entire process. But ever since then, I started sharing that I was writing with other people, and so many people in my network started sharing the amazing things they were working on. Some of them were writing books, others were starting businesses or launching podcasts. And I just remember being so encouraged and excited by their stories. And I thought, I've got to get this word out to more people. So that's what this podcast is all about. I created Yet to encourage and inspire people to get started and to keep going on their dream, because I believe that there are so many people out there who have a dream, a goal, or an idea, but for whatever reason, they haven't started it yet. And so I created this podcast to share stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you get started and to keep going. And I want to start off right out the gate out of season 2. I want to share kind of a theme of where I want to go and what I want to kind of have as the backdrop of season 2. So I'm a Christian, and this is not a Christian podcast, but it does have a Christian host. And in Christian circles, sometimes people at the beginning of a new year, for example, will choose a verse of the year. And it's just kind of something that you want to maybe memorize or meditate on or kind of have in the background, the thing through which you kind of view any of your interactions or things that happen to you throughout that year. So for example, you might say, my verse of the year is going to be Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And so when you're going through challenging times, or really any time throughout that year, you anchor back to that verse and you think, okay, what does it mean that Jesus is a shepherd? He protects, he guides, he leads, he provides for me. And it's just something that you can anchor to and kind of true back to maybe the theme of that year for you. So similarly, I want to kind of set out a theme for season 2 of this podcast. For season 1, I think the theme, if I was going to look back and pick one, it would have been what I discussed in episode 0. You make the rules. It's your podcast, it's your book, it's your business. So you get to decide which calls to make and how you want to do things. And that really was what I practiced, what I preached when I went through season 1. I did some solo episodes. I did some guest episodes. I did some bonus episodes. Some were long, some were short. I really was kind of just going with whatever I felt was best to serve the audience. And I learned a lot along the way, had a lot of fun. You're probably going to get a lot more of that in season 2 as well. But for season 2, the theme, kind of the word or the idea that I want to have as the backdrop for all of season 2 is this. I want to focus on rest and giving ourselves grace. Now, that might sound a little bit curious, given that this is a podcast to help encourage and inspire people to get after their goals. And on its face, like that may be true, because I do want you to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and start taking action. Like, I think one of the worst things you can do when you have a big goal or an idea or a dream that you want to accomplish is to let that thing just sit on the shelf and collect dust. So on the one hand, I am going to encourage you often to keep going, to persevere when things get hard, to pick yourself back up, to find ways to succeed and to keep moving. But one thing that I've learned as a writer and as a podcaster is that it is very easy to allow yourself to get burnt out. So I've seen this in my own experience. I've seen it with others that I've talked to. You put so much pressure on yourself in the world of writing, for example, where if you don't hit a certain word count for the day, the week, whatever, like you can beat yourself up about that. And I think that in some sense is healthy to have some accountability and to have some goals that you're striving for. One of the things that I kind of true back to all along is something that one of my podcast guests in season 1 said. I was interviewing an author named Paula Vance, and in our conversation, she said a lot of great things, but one of the things that she said that's just kind of echoed around in my brain and my heart ever since was she said, this is supposed to be fun. And I don't want you to lose that aspect of it, because especially if you are a writer or a creator, you started doing this maybe for a lot of reasons. Maybe you're doing it to prove yourself to yourself or to someone else that you can do it. Maybe you're doing it because you want to make money. Maybe you're doing it because you have an important message that you want to get out to the world. But I think for many of us, one of the reasons that we started doing this is because we wanted to have a kind of creative outlet, a way to express ourselves creatively that we are not otherwise getting in our vocation or in other areas of life. And so you've got enough stress, you've got enough pressure in your life with your job, your family, your relationships, your finances, whatever else is going on. This book you're working on, this podcast that you're doing, this thing is supposed to be fun. And so the word that I want to focus on, the idea that I want to focus on is rest and giving yourself grace. Because at the end of the day, if you are allowing yourself to be mastered by the metrics, the downloads, the listens, the sales numbers, any of that stuff, like it's fine and good to keep an eye on those things. But if you allow yourself to be mastered by those things, I think you're headed for trouble and you're taking the fun out of the thing that you're doing. And so again, I think that no matter what, we should do everything we can to try and avoid burnout, because I want you to find success in the thing that you're working on. And I want it to be fun because, like Paula said, it is supposed to be fun. And so I have a couple ideas I want to share, just starting things off here, how you can do that, how you can kind of avoid burnout, things you can build into your normal rhythms that will help you find success, help you find rest, and give yourself the ability to give yourself grace. So number one is, remember, this is a long game. I know that you may have a goal to, for example, write a book in a year, or get a certain number of downloads on your podcast within 6 months or something like that. You may or may not hit that goal, right? Depending on, one of my guests from season 1 was talking about having a specific hard and fast date when she wanted to complete her book. And then, guess what? A massive hurricane came through and crushed her town. And so she had a lot of things, just life happened really fast for her. And she had to readjust and recalibrate everything that she was working on. Does that mean that she failed in writing her book? No. It means that she had to give herself some grace, continue to work toward her goal. And I have no doubt, based on the conversations that I've had with her, she is going to finish that book. It just may look a little bit different than she thought at first. By the way, I think that's true of all of us. The thing you set out to do, the big vision that you have at the beginning, there's going to be so many twists and turns along that path. It may end up looking wildly different than you anticipated on the front end. But to be honest, from my perspective, I think that in many cases, the journey is actually the point. And so lean into that, follow the twists and turns as they come, and give yourself grace. Feel the freedom to adjust on the fly. Recognize that you are in this for the long game. If you're a writer, this is not a one and done thing. You're going to be a writer for the rest of your life. Now that you've unlocked this potential, that you've taken that step and started working toward the book, like this is something that's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. So recognize that you're playing the long game. You've got plenty of time. That's number one. Number two, set yourself up for some easy wins. I'm going to cite a couple of books and a couple of authors that have helped me think through this. The first is a guy named John Acuff. And so if you've followed my podcast or my social media for a while, you know I'm a huge fan of John. He is a keynote speaker, an author, podcaster, super smart guy. And he wrote a ton of good books. But one of the ones that I read recently is a book called All It Takes Is a Goal. And in that book, I believe it's in that book. And John, I hope you'll forgive me if it's in one of your other books, but he basically encourages us to cut our goals in half. So you have an idea, a thing that you want to do. Say, maybe you say you want to lose 30 pounds. John would say, okay, great. Start by saying you want to lose 15, because that's a much easier goal to accomplish. And once you hit that goal, then you'll have the confidence of knowing that you can do it. And then the sky's the limit after that. So set yourself up for easy wins. One of the ways you can do that is cut your goal in half. And so if you're thinking about that in terms of a timeline, you can do it the opposite way, right? So if you say, I want to finish my book within a year, maybe you go ahead and double that timeline and give yourself 2 years to finish the book. That's a much easier goal to accomplish. Note, I did not say that's an easy goal, but it is easier than is 1 year. And it sets you up for a little bit of an easier win. The other point I would say under this kind of first point of, or this point of set yourself up for easy wins, is break down your goals into very small, very achievable tasks or habits. And so if you listen to season 1, you know I'm a huge fan of the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And in that book, he kind of talks about this idea of taking the person you want to be, the thing you want to accomplish, and kind of dialing that back to the tiniest habits that you can accomplish easily on a given day. And so, for me, when it comes to writing, my goal early on, I wanted to have a specific word count that I hit. So I want to do, let's say, 500 words a day. Some days I knocked that out of the water. Some days I didn't even come close. And so my goal very quickly went from write 500 words a day to, hey, I just want to write something. And so even if it was just a sentence or a paragraph, like to know that I'm sitting down and writing something's always better than nothing. And so I'm stacking up these habits day after day after day in the hope that eventually I will be able to accomplish my goal. I want to share a quote that I read the other day from Vincent van Gogh. You've probably heard of him. He says that great things are not done by impulse, but by a series of small things brought together. And so as you do these small things day after day, time after time, session after session, you're going to, over time, accumulate tons of progress toward your goal. So set yourself up for some easy wins by 1, cutting your goal in half, and by 2, breaking your goal down into the tiniest habits that are easily achievable. And the other thing that I would say kind of under this sub point is celebrate your wins, all of them, even the small ones, and track your data. This is like, you may not be a tracker like me, but I love tracking data, and so that I can have something to look back on. So one of the things that I do is at my office, I always take the stairs. I work on the 4th floor of a building. There is an elevator there, but I always take the stairs no matter what. And I would go, there's 112, yes, I counted 112 steps from the 1st floor to the 4th floor. And so I have a little planner at my desk, and every day when I go up those 4 flights of steps, I would put a little tick mark. So I would do 112 steps, 3, 4, 5 times a day, depending on how many times I went downstairs or whatever. But one of the things I started to realize was that sometimes I would have a meeting on the 3rd floor or on the 2nd floor. And so what that did is it brought me down 1 flight, but not all the way down. And so I would not do a tick mark for that, that trip up and down the steps. And I realized after a while, like, I'm missing out on tracking some of these steps. And so what I did was I said, okay, instead of tracking 112 times for each tick mark, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide that by 4. There's 28 steps on each flight. And so every time I go from 1 to 4, I'm giving myself 4 ticks. And that does a couple of things. Number 1, it helps me keep sight of all of the wins that I'm taking. Every step gets counted and celebrated. And psychologically, there's just something different about writing 4 tick marks instead of writing 1. So I don't know if that trick will work for you, but it's worked great for me. I am great now at climbing steps because I do it all the time. So again, number one, the first way that you can avoid burnout and give yourself grace is set yourself up for easy wins. Number two, the second way that I think you can help yourself when it comes to avoiding burnout is spending time where you most enjoy. If you are running a business or launching a podcast or marketing a book, there are going to be elements of that are not super fun for you, especially when it comes to marketing. So I can tell you, I am on Instagram. I have an email list. I'm on Threads. I am doing a podcast. Obviously, I'm writing a book. There's a lot of different things that I'm doing, and some of those are more fun than others. One of the things that has happened to me recently is I have just kind of I felt discouraged by the algorithms on Instagram because it just kind of seems like you're at the mercy of some system that I don't know how it works. I like some of my reels perform really well relative to others. Most of them don't. I'm thankful for all the likes and comments that I do get, but by and large, I'm not going viral out there. So it just feels almost like a grind. And one of the things that a friend of mine, actually a guest from this show, Emily Aborn, told me recently was, hey, if you're not having fun on Instagram, spend less time there. Like spend more time doing the things that you enjoy and less time doing the things that you don't really enjoy. Now, I will say that I do like interacting with people on Instagram, and I love seeing the encouragement that others post. So it's not like I've abandoned it completely. But one of the things that I have found is I really like Threads. I'm kind of an old school Twitter person. So back before Twitter got kind of weird and contentious, it was a lot of fun just to share a quick sentence or an idea and have people interact with it. Threads kind of feels like that, except at least in the circles I've been in, all the writers and all the people that I've connected with have been super encouraging. And it's just like, it feels like, I kind of liken it to like Instagram seems like you're in a big city. Maybe you're in New York and you're like, everyone's on the subway with their earbuds in, just headed to work on their grind, doing their thing. And you respect the people that are doing that, but it's like everyone's locked in, focused dead ahead and seeing what they can get and what they can do. And Threads to me feels like you're walking into a neighborhood bar and somebody hands you a pint and slaps you on the shoulder and says, hey man, I'm glad you're here. That's just been my experience. So I'm spending more time on Threads now because it's enjoyable. It's still allowing me to engage with other people. It's still allowing me to get the word out about my book and about my podcast in a way that's more restful and more fun for me. So spend more time doing the things that you enjoy and spend less time doing the things that you don't enjoy. Doesn't mean that you necessarily cut them out completely. Maybe you do, but don't feel like you have to keep banging your head against a wall if it's not working for you. Okay, so in this one may be a little bit controversial, but recognize that taking a break is an essential part of your progress. One of the things that I saw recently on Threads actually is I've also connected with a few podcasters, and many of them have talked about burnout. How do you avoid burnout on podcasts? And so one of the things that I've offered up always is do podcast seasons. That accomplishes a lot of things, but one of the things that it does is it allows you, the podcaster, to step away for a minute, to catch your breath. If you've got a busy season with your family or with your life or whatever, you can plan 8, 10, 12, 20 episodes and then pause for a month or two. Guess what? The world's not going to end if you don't record a podcast for a month. The world is not going to end if you skip a day or a week of writing your book. And by the way, if you are a writer, usually if you're like me, you might have found that when you step away, it's actually then that you start to get a flood of really good ideas that you can use in your writing. So don't feel like taking a break is a failure. Understand that breaks are an essential part of the process. And indeed, breaks are essential to progress. And ultimately, we're all gunning for achievement. We're all gunning for that big vision, trying to hit we're trying to get to the point where we've made it, right? Whatever it is for you. But I want to encourage you, something that I've said before, and I'll say again, progress is success. If you are continuing to move forward, maybe slower than you think, maybe less consistent than you think, but if you are continuing to work toward your thing, you are already achieving success. It's just going to be a matter of continuing to do that, giving yourself grace and continuing to work until you realize your dream. And again, it may look different than you thought initially. So that's it. I'm so glad you've joined. Listen, if you want to hear more about me and my podcast and my book, you can check out my website. It's tcburr.com. I would love for you to go there and send me a note. If you have feedback on this show or anything you want to hear, I have a ton of guests coming up, tons of writers that I've connected with. I can't wait to share their stories with you. I've got some solo content as well. But if you have any ideas of topics you want me to cover or guests you think I should bring on the show, send me a note. I would love to connect. And please, 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 wherever you're listening to this show, give me a rating or review. If you found value in this one, I would love to hear from you, and I would love for you to share this out with more people. Thanks so much, and I will talk to you soon. Later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.